Okay, let's dive right into this. Right now, at this very second, there is a literal, unseen, microscopic war zone raging inside your body. Every single day, you're bombarded by bacteria, viruses, fungi, and microscopic debris that want nothing more than to break through your defenses and just set up camp. Now, obviously, your body has an incredible defense network to fight this off. But today, in this explainer, we're going to focus on the absolute elite tier of that network. We are talking about macrophages, the undeniable special forces of your immune system. To really wrap our heads around their role, let's look at this comparison. Your everyday white blood cells, the neutrophils, they handle your standard, run-of-the-mill threats. They're your highly capable, reliable ground troops, right? But when things get complicated, when a pathogen is particularly stubborn or delicate tissue needs repairing, the macrophages step in and take cellular warfare to an entirely different, highly adaptable level. They are the Navy SEALs, the Delta Force of your bloodstream, fully equipped for the absolute most specialized missions your biology can throw at them.
And you can actually see this in their physical differences. If neutrophils are the jeeps, fast, smaller, rushing straight to the scene of an infection, macrophages are the tanks. They're significantly larger and, a little bit slower to arrive. But here is the critical difference. Macrophages are built to hang around for the long haul. Unlike the jeeps, macrophages can handily synthesize proteins right on the fly. This means they can adapt to almost any hostile condition, instantly changing their tactics based on exactly what kind of enemy they're facing. They don't just secure the area, they occupy it.
Section 1. Monocyte to macrophage, boot camp and deployment. So how exactly do these elite tanks get made? Well, before they become the highly trained fighters we just talked about, they start their careers under a completely different name, monocytes. A monocyte is basically a macrophage in boot camp. It patrols the bloodstream, just bumping along the walls of your blood vessels. Under a microscope, you'd see it has a perfectly smooth outer border and this very distinct C-shaped nucleus. In a healthy person, these monocytes make up about 5 to 10% of all circulating white blood cells, literally just waiting for the call to action.
What's truly fascinating, though, is the dramatic physical and chemical transformation that takes place when that call to action finally comes. The moment a monocyte leaves the bloodstream and enters an infected tissue, it completely changes its identity. That smooth outer membrane, it rapidly morphs into this fuzzy, ruffled surface. It physically grows in size. It chemically rewires itself to recognize and destroy microbial invaders. It goes from being a circulating monocyte on a routine patrol to a highly mobilized, fully mature macrophage primed for combat.
But this brings up a pretty crazy mystery. Your body is a vast, incredibly complex network with thousands of miles of blood vessels. When there's a tiny infection in, say, the very tip of your index finger, how on earth do these microscopic tanks know exactly where to exit the bloodstream? It's not like they can pull over and ask for directions, right?
The answer lies in chemokines. Think of chemokines as a trail of molecular breadcrumbs, or maybe a microscopic flare gun. When tissue gets damaged or infected, the local cells release these chemical attractants. As the chemokines seep out, they create a distinct trail. The monocytes detect this chemical gradient in the blood, which tells them exactly where to exit the vessel. But chemokines do way more than just guide the way. They actually send a powerful signal to the monocyte to grow up and arm its antimicrobial weapons before it even reaches the battlefield.
Section 2. The Art of Cellular Warfare, Combat Tactics.
Now, what's really interesting here is that once our macrophages arrive and mature, they aren't just a single one-size-fits-all army. Not at all. They actually differentiate into two primary groups based on the chemical signals floating around the battle site. If they get hit with cytokines like interferon gamma, they become the M1 population. These are your highly aggressive, pro-inflammatory assault troops designed to utterly destroy microbes. But if they receive different signals, like interleukin-4, they become the M2 population. These are basically your combat medics. They are anti-inflammatory, and their main job is damage control and repairing the tissue once the fight is over.
Let's look at an M1 macrophage in action. When it encounters an enemy, it engages in a brutal and incredibly efficient four-step process called phagocytosis. First, a molecule called an opsinin tags the microbe, basically painting a massive target on its back. Second, the macrophage physically surrounds and swallows the microbe alive, trapping it inside a cellular stomach called a phagosome. Third, a specialized compartment called a lysosome merges with the stomach, dumping these powerful digestive enzymes and acids right onto the microbe, completely obliterating it. And finally, and definitely keep this in mind for later, the macrophage takes little pieces of the digested enemy, called peptides, and proudly displays them on its own surface as a trophy.
Section 3. Embedded tissue defenders, the sleeper cells.
Okay, so not all macrophages roam the body looking for a fight. Some are deeply embedded within our tissues from the very moment we're born. This is known as the mononuclear phagocyte system, a vast, decentralized network of macrophages that take up permanent residence in specific organs. Depending on where they live, they take on completely different names in specialized roles. We've got Kupffer cells in the liver, alveolar macrophages in the lungs, Langerhans cells in our skin, microglial cells protecting the brain, osteoclasts managing our bones, and highly specialized macrophages over in the spleen. Let's take a quick look at just how wildly specialized these embedded sleeper cells can get. Let's start with the liver. Kupffer cells are absolute workhorses, making up 80 to 90% of this entire stationary macrophage system. Because the liver processes blood coming straight from the intestinal tract, it is absolutely full of debris and potential pathogens. The Kupffer cells sit right in the blood flow, using this strange, irregular, udder-like shape to maximize their surface area. They act as relentless living filters, constantly yanking microbial garbage and worn-out red blood cells right out of your bloodstream before they can circulate anywhere else. This level of teamwork is brilliantly on display in your lungs every single time you take a breath of dirty air. Down in the deepest parts of your lungs, alveolar macrophages are on constant patrol, just eating up bacteria, mold spores, and dust. But get this, they don't do it alone. They work seamlessly with helper cells called type 2 pneumocytes. These helper cells manufacture specialized proteins that act like homing beacons. They attach to the microbes you inhale and perfectly tag them, so the alveolar macrophages can easily find and devour them. Moving to the skin, we have a really great piece of medical history. These skin-dwelling macrophages were discovered way back in 1868 by a 21-year-old medical student named Paul Langerhans. They look like strange little starfish with long, tree-like branches called dendrites. And because of these tentacles, Langerhans originally thought he had discovered nervous tissue. But what he actually found were dendritic cells, a highly specialized type of macrophage embedded deep in the living layers of your skin, using those long arms to reach out, grab invading microbes, and sound the immune alarm. Now I want you to think about a truly staggering number. 10 billion. 10 billion. That is the number of brand new red blood cells your body produces every single day. And that entire massive process, from birth to death, is meticulously micromanaged by bone marrow and spleen macrophages.
The level of supervision here is honestly intense. When a red blood cell is born in the bone marrow, it actually physically attaches itself to a central nurse macrophage. This nurse macrophage feeds iron directly into the baby cell and literally plucks out its nucleus so the cell has more room to carry oxygen. Then, after 120 days of hard work, when that red blood cell is old and worn out, resident macrophages in the spleen and liver gobble it up. They meticulously recycle its precious iron right back to the bone marrow to start the whole process over again.
Even your brain has its own dedicated macrophages, which we call microglial cells. Because the brain is shielded by the blood-brain barrier, it can't rely on the regular bloodstream to clean up waste. So these microglial cells step in as self-appointed garbage collectors. In their resting or ramified stage, they sit still, waving their tentacles around looking for trouble. But the second they detect a pathogen or a strange protein, they shift into their amoeboid stage. They round up, become highly mobile, and actively eat up threats and cellular debris to keep your brain healthy.
Now, perhaps the most unusual macrophages of all are the osteoclasts. These guys are wild. They are giant macrophages that actually fuse together to form multinucleated cells sitting directly in your bones. But they don't hunt microbes. Instead, they use their powerful acids and enzymes to carefully tear down and reabsorb old bone tissue, making way for new bone to be built. Interestingly, this whole process is kept in check by the hormone estrogen. When estrogen levels drop, like during menopause for example, these specialized macrophages can get overly aggressive and pull too much calcium out of the bones, which leads directly to osteoporosis.
Section 4. Bridging the immune system. The ultimate mission. So, the crucial point is this. Eating microbes, recycling red blood cells, sculpting bone, these are all incredible feats, but they're actually just the setup. The ultimate distinction is here. The physical act of a macrophage hunting down and eating a microbe is part of your innate immunity. It's the nonspecific, immediate, put-out-the-fire response. But remember those little enemy trophies? The peptides we talked about earlier?
By carrying those peptides away from the battlefield and presenting them directly to the specialized cells of your lymphatic system, the macrophage triggers your acquired immunity. It hands over the specific intelligence needed to create antibodies and long-term immune memory. This ensures that if that specific virus or bacteria ever returns, your body is ready to crush it instantly.
Which leaves us with a truly profound question to ponder as we wrap up this explainer. If these elite cellular soldiers, these biological tanks, didn't painstakingly gather and pass on their enemy intelligence to the rest of the lymphatic system, would our bodies ever truly learn to defend themselves? Think about it. We would be fighting the exact same battles, starting from absolute scratch every single day of our lives. It really makes you marvel at the brilliant, microscopic special forces working tirelessly inside you to keep you safe.